So usually when we think about modern transportation, we think about, absolute control.
Right, like tight schedules and logistics.
Exactly. GPS tracking down to the literal meter, safety protocols that are supposedly designed to account for, like, almost every conceivable variable.
Yeah, that's the theory anyway.
Right. But then you see this video from July 13th, 2026, and all of those assumptions just totally evaporate.
Oh, completely. I mean, it really forces you to realize just how fragile those human systems actually are when they come up against something completely untamable.
It really does. So we have this terrifying, deeply cinematic reality that was captured on video by a crew member inside a CN Rail freight train.
Yeah, it's wild footage.
This massive, incredibly heavy machine is just driving straight into an absolute inferno near the community of Armstrong in northwestern Ontario.
Right.
And when you watch this footage, you see these thick, just angry orange flames whipping violently right across the windows of the cab.
The smoke is so thick.
Yeah, the smoke is so dense, it literally looks like nighttime. And, I mean, you can almost feel the heat radiating through the screen. And the exact quote from the crew member recording it is just chilling. He says, "This could potentially overtake us here. We're encased in flames now."
Which is just terrifying. And to give you some staggering context for what you're seeing in the video, this isn't just an isolated brush fire that, got out of hand.
Right, it's so much bigger than that.
Exactly. We are currently looking at the worst fire season in Ontario since the devastating fires of 2021. And the numbers are, frankly, they're difficult to process.
Yeah, they really are.
So far this year, there have been 482 fires.
Wow.
And if you compare that to the exact same time last year, there were 362.
Okay, so a big jump.
Yeah, but if you go back just one more year to 2024, there were only 170.
Oh, wow. So from 170 to nearly 500.
It is an exponential escalation, yeah. Right now, as we sit here talking, there are around 180 active fires burning in northern Ontario alone.
That jump from 170 to almost 500 in just a couple of years is, well, it's exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. Because for you, listening right now, this isn't just some distant tragedy happening in a remote forest somewhere.
No, not at all.
Our mission for this deep dive is to explore how these fires reach such a critical, uncontrollable mass. We're going to unpack the logistical failures that are actually allowing trains to drive into walls of fire.
Which is still hard to believe.
Right. And we're going to get into the fierce political battles happening behind the scenes over, how we fund disaster response and reveal how this specific crisis directly impacts you, even if you live thousands of miles away from the actual flames.
Because a disaster of this magnitude creates a ripple effect. It touches everything from the global supply chain that, stocks your local grocery store to the literal air quality in your neighborhood.
Okay, so let's unpack this train incident because it really serves as this perfect microcosm for the entire crisis.
Yeah.
So we have a CN rail train surrounded by trees burning on both sides of the tracks. Now, the workers were safely evacuated. CN did confirm that, and operations in the area were temporarily suspended. But the Teamsters Union, represented by Marc-André Gauthier, has completely denounced CN.
And understandably so.
Right. They are demanding to know why the company sent a rail crew into what was a known active wildfire zone. The crew actually had to be treated for smoke inhalation.
Yeah, which is serious.
And Gauthier is publicly questioning how a multi-billion-dollar company's monitoring systems failed so spectacularly. And, looking at it from the outside, it's like relying on a navigation app that tells you to keep driving straight into a Category 5 hurricane.
That's a great analogy, yeah.
Like, how does a massive rail company with all its technology and all its resources miss a literal wall of fire?
Well, the union is definitely right to be angry, but when you look at the actual mechanics of how we monitor these remote regions, you start to see why the telemetry failed.
Okay, how so?
It reveals this massive tension between strict corporate supply chain logistics and rapidly shifting environmental realities. Like, we are used to running our world on systems that operate on predictable, static metrics.
Sure, train leaves point A at noon, arrives at point B at 3.
Exactly. But wildland fires of this scale, they completely defy predictability.
Right.
The environmental conditions right now, extreme heat, incredibly dry brush, and very strong shifting winds, they mean that fire behavior and direction can change in a matter of minutes.
But wait, if you're running a massive logistics network, shouldn't you have, real-time satellite data or thermal imaging tracking this stuff ahead of the train? Like, why didn't a dispatcher just hit a red light on a control board?
That's a fair question, but the real problem is the lag.
The lag.
Yeah, you have dispatchers looking at satellite data and sensor readings that often have a delay. It can be sometimes 15 minutes to an hour, depending on the system they're using and the remoteness of the track.
Oh, wow, an hour's a long time for a fire.
Right. Now, pair that sensor lag with the physical reality of a freight train. These trains can be miles long.
Yeah.
They carry thousands of tons of cargo, like lumber, grain, retail goods heading for store shelves. A train moving at full speed takes miles just to come to a complete stop.
Just to stop.
Just to stop. And on the other side of that equation, you have a fire that is incredibly dynamic and explosive. Wind can suddenly shift and push a fire forward at 10 or 15 kilometers an hour.
So basically, the monitoring systems might have shown a totally clear track when the train departed its last checkpoint, but the reality on the ground swallowed the track before they even arrived.
Exactly that. The union is essentially pointing out that our logistical protocols are not keeping pace with the speed and ferocity of modern natural disasters.
Right.
You literally cannot run a strict minute-by-minute freight schedule through an environment that is constantly changing with the wind. The infrastructure is just too rigid, and the environment is way too chaotic.
It really paints a picture of this immovable human infrastructure just violently colliding with the force of nature.
It really does.
And you can see why the technology failed when you look at the sheer scale of the fires driving that chaos. Let's talk about the fire officially named Thunder Bay 36.
Right, Thunder Bay 36. That is what we classify as a mega fire.
A mega fire.
Yeah, several smaller fires have actually merged into it, creating this monstrous blaze that currently sits at 351,000 hectares.
That's just unbelievable.
And it is completely out of control. And it's not the only one either. We are also looking at the Fort Francis 14 and 15 fires, which are burning at roughly 55,000 and 48,000 hectares, respectively.
Those numbers are just massive. But I think, hectares can be kind of hard to visualize if you aren't working in forestry.
Definitely.
So to put 351,000 hectares into perspective, that isn't just a large forest fire. That is a geographic footprint, roughly the size of a small country.
Yeah, or a massive metropolitan region.
Right. It's literally an ocean of fire. And it's not empty land either.
No, absolutely not.
The human cost here is profound. Multiple remote communities are under mandatory evacuation orders right now, like Armstrong, White Sand First Nation, Lac-et-Mille-Lacs First Nation.
Yeah, it's devastating.
And I really want to focus on the Collins First Nation, or Namagusautagan First Nation. Grand Council Chief Linda DeBassage noted that the community was, quote, completely devastated.
Completely devastated.
Community buildings, homes, just wiped out. Thankfully, every single member was accounted for, but the physical infrastructure is just gone.
Yeah.
What does a rapid evacuation actually look like when the town you live in is just being erased in real time?
Well, evacuating a remote community is, it's one of the most logistically complex, high-stakes operations imaginable.
I can imagine.
We aren't talking about towns with multiple multi-lane highways leading to neighboring cities. In many of these Northern Ontario communities, there is literally only one logging road or access highway in and out.
Right, just one way out.
Yeah, and as we saw with the highway closures around Mishki-Gogamang and Gull Bay First Nations, those single lifelines get cut off by the flames almost immediately.
Wow.
And once the road is gone, you are entirely reliant on airlifts.
But you can't always fly a plane through a 351,000 hectare fire.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the smoke must be impenetrable.
And that is the terrifying bottleneck. The visibility drops to absolute zero. Furthermore, a fire of that magnitude generates so much extreme heat that it creates thermal updrafts.
Like it messes with the air currents.
Exactly. It literally creates its own weather system, complete with erratic winds and sometimes even fire-generated lightning.
Wait, fire-generated?
Yeah, it's wild. So the airspace becomes incredibly dangerous for small aircraft or helicopters. The situation became so dire that Ontario's Minister of Emergency Preparedness, Jill Dunlop, had to issue a formal request for assistance to the federal government. She specifically asked for the Canadian Armed Forces to step in just to expedite these evacuations. Remote communities face such disproportionate vulnerability because their escape routes are so limited, their local emergency resources are easily overwhelmed, and the sheer physical distance from major aid hubs means help simply takes longer to arrive.
It's harrowing to think about having to, just grab whatever fits in a single bag, board a military aircraft through thick smoke, and leave knowing there might literally be nothing to come back to.
It's unimaginable for most people. And
while these life or death struggles are happening on the physical front lines, there is an equally fierce battle happening on the political front lines over the resources needed to fight these fires.
Ah, yes. The funding debate.
Right.
Right.
Because fixing this requires money, and the debate over how that money is deployed is getting incredibly heated.
The funding debate is central to this entire crisis. You have the Ontario New Democratic Party, the NDP, who serve as the official opposition in the province.
Right.
They're arguing forcefully that Premier Doug Ford's government is chronically underfunding the forest fire crews. Lise Vaugeois, an NDP representative, points out that the province set the base budget for 2026 at $150 million.
Now, $150 million sounds like a massive amount of money to the average person, right up until you look at the historical data of what they actually spent in the preceding years.
Exactly. Context changes everything here. The province actually spent $171 million in 2024.
Okay.
Then in 2025, they spent $271 million.
Right.
So budgeting only $150 million for 2026, especially when the trend over the last 3 years is clearly showing rapidly escalating costs and worsening environmental conditions, it has led critics to say the ministry is constantly playing catch-up.
Yeah, makes sense.
Vaugeois claims that because the money isn't there in the official budget up front, the emergency services have to requisition funds after the fact. And this has real, tangible operational impacts.
Like what?
Well, she pointed out that 2 vital water bombers couldn't even fly because there was a lack of trained crews to operate them. This ties into long-standing complaints from frontline firefighters who are leaving the service due to poor retention, grueling hours, and pay issues.
Now, on the flip side, Premier Doug Ford has strongly defended his government's approach. He stated plainly, quote, "We'd never underfund our firefights."
Right.
And his defense rests on the mechanics of government finance. He pointed out that while the official base budget might be $150 million, the government always spends significantly more than that base when it's needed during an active emergency.
Right. They tap into reserves.
Exactly. They aren't capping the spending at $150 million. They're just holding the rest in reserve.
Mm-hmm.
He also pointed out the fact that despite the unprecedented scale of these fires, there have been no deaths, which he called remarkable.
And it really is.
Honestly, given the size of these fires and the speed at which they move, keeping the fatality rate at 0 is a monumental achievement by the emergency responders.
Absolutely.
And it's easy to see why the comment sections on the news articles covering these fires are just an absolute war zone right now. You've got half the commenters pointing the finger at federal figures like Prime Minister Trudeau and Mark Carney, arguing that federal carbon tax policies and pipeline regulations have somehow hindered proper management and choked off economic resources.
Right, yeah.
And on the other side, you have people placing the blame squarely on Doug Ford, accusing his provincial government of enacting dangerous budget cuts to essential emergency services. Now, I do want to make it very clear to our listeners, we are entirely neutral here.
Yes, completely.
We are absolutely not taking any sides or endorsing either viewpoint. We are simply reporting what the sources in the public discourse are saying.
Exactly. We're just laying out the arguments.
Right. But setting the partisan finger-pointing aside, the underlying mechanical question remains. If we know, unequivocally, that fire seasons are statistically getting worse, jumping from 170 fires in 2024 to nearly 500 this year, why does the budget look like a retroactive guess rather than a proactive guarantee?
Well, the core issue here is the clash between bureaucratic administration and real-time crisis management.
Okay, unpack that for me.
So, in government finance, a base budget is what a department is guaranteed to receive at the start of the fiscal year. It's the baseline they can use to plan their permanent staffing and their equipment upgrades.
Gotcha.
But emergency requisitioning is the mechanism used to unlock additional funds when a crisis exceeds that base budget. From an administrative standpoint, a government might argue it's fiscally irresponsible to lock up hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars in a base budget for fires that theoretically might not happen.
Right. They prefer to hold the money centrally and release it as the emergency dictates.
Exactly.
But I mean, if I'm a fire chief and I know my base budget is only $150 million, I can't proactively hire an extra 50 crews in February just in case July is bad.
You've hit the nail on the head. That bureaucratic friction is exactly what the opposition is highlighting. You cannot preemptively upgrade equipment in March with money you aren't allowed to ask for until July.
Right.
If you are waiting for the crisis to happen to unlock the funds, you are inherently playing catch-up.
And that brings us directly back to the water bombers. You can't just fill out an emergency requisition form in the middle of July and instantly hire a pilot when the planes are already needed in the sky.
Because flying a water bomber isn't like flying a commercial jet. It requires highly specialized training. You are flying incredibly low to the ground, navigating severe thermal updrafts caused by the fire, dropping down to scoop water from a lake in seconds, and then flying back into near zero visibility.
That sounds incredibly
It
intense.
is. Having the physical aircraft sitting on the tarmac is completely useless if you haven't had the proactive budget to recruit, train, and retain the specialized crews required to actually fly them.
Yeah.
The administrative processes designed to protect taxpayer dollars are clashing dangerously with the fast-moving environmental realities on the ground.
It's a huge disconnect. But you know, the scariest part of a 351,000-hectare fire is that it refuses to stay in northern Ontario.
Oh, definitely not.
It doesn't care about provincial budgets or logging roads. It creates an ecosystem of impact that eventually reaches your front door, wherever you are. Like, if you stepped outside in Massachusetts yesterday, you felt it.
Yeah, the most immediate and visible macro-level ripple effect is the smoke.
The smoke was insane.
The sheer volume of particulate matter being pumped into the atmosphere by a fire of that magnitude is staggering. That smoke drifted south and completely choked southern Ontario, to the point where Toronto recently recorded the worst air quality of any major city in the world.
Wait, the air in Toronto was more polluted than any other major global city,
Right.
just because of fire burning hundreds of miles away?
Yes, and it obviously doesn't stop at the international border either. That same massive smoke plume drifted deep into the United States, triggering severe air quality warnings across New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Connecticut.
That's crazy.
People hundreds of miles away who might not even know where Armstrong, Ontario is, are waking up to hazy orange skies and being told by their local meteorologists that it's physically unsafe to go for a jog outside.
Wow. And back up north, the macro effects change daily life instantly. There are strict sweeping fire bans across the entire region. No open-air burning, no campfires. All burning permits are suspended.
Yeah, everything is locked down.
But beyond the global air currents and the military deployments, there is a deeply poignant human detail in our sources that really highlights what disaster response often misses.
Yeah.
We talked about the logistics of evacuating a town, but official emergency logistics generally account for human bodies and physical infrastructure. They often completely ignore the emotional infrastructure, like pets.
And the gap between the official response and the reality on the ground is where you really see grassroots community resilience step in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amidst all the talk of multi-million-dollar base budgets in Canadian Armed Forces aircraft, you have the Northern Reach Rescue Network.
Right.
This is a grassroots organization based in Thunder Bay that is absolutely scrambling to find foster families.
Yeah.
Because when these sudden chaotic evacuations happen, when a literal wall of fire is moving toward your town and you have minutes to get your family onto a military airlift.
You can't always take everything with you.
Exactly. Many beloved pets are tragically left behind. Or families are displaced into temporary urban shelters that simply don't allow animals.
Which is heartbreaking.
It is. This network is actively begging for people as far south as Toronto to take in displaced dogs and cats so they have a safe place while their families just try to survive the loss of their homes. It's a localized heartbreak happening inside a massive international disaster.
It really is a perfect illustration of how a disaster of this scale demands a response from every layer of our civilization.
Yeah.
You have the macro level response, right? The provincial ministers arguing over 9-figure budgets, the military logistics of moving human beings out of danger, the international air quality indices tracking particulate matter across borders, and simultaneously you have the micro level community response. Neighbors fostering a displaced golden retriever, local volunteers stepping into the chaos to save the emotional pieces of a community that the official infrastructure just couldn't carry. Environmental disasters do not respect jurisdictional borders, and they certainly don't distinguish between the macro and the micro.
It is entirely interconnected. We started this deep dive inside a CN Rail freight train encased in flames, highlighting the terrifying clash between strict, minute-by-minute corporate logistics and unpredictable, fast-moving natural disasters.
And we examined the staggering scale of the fires themselves. Over 180 active infernos, including a mega fire measuring an unfathomable 351,000 hectares.
Right.
And the logistical nightmare of airlifting remote First Nation communities out of danger before their infrastructure is completely erased.
We navigated the intense political crossfire over how we fund disaster response, breaking down that dangerous friction between waiting to unlock emergency funds versus proactively budgeting for a guaranteed crisis so that highly trained water bomber pilots are actually ready when the fire starts.
And finally, we tracked the massive ripple effects, seeing how a fire in the remote north chokes the air across New England and how it sparks a frantic grassroots effort to save the pets left behind in the smoke.
Which brings us directly back to you, the listener. Why should you care about a deep dive into Northern Ontario's fire season?
Yeah.
Well, because this crisis proves that our physical infrastructure, our global climate, and our local politics are all deeply, intricately tied together.
Absolutely.
Whether it is the safety of the supply chain that brings raw materials and retail goods to your city, the allocation of your tax dollars to emergency services that might need to rescue you one day, or the literal physical air you are breathing into your lungs this very moment, disaster preparedness is no longer a theoretical exercise debated by government ministers.
Yeah.
It is your daily reality.
The choices we make today about how we fund, monitor, and manage these crises will inevitably determine the quality of life for everyone downwind. And as we've seen, eventually, everyone is downwind.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering question to mull over. If our current emergency budgets, our corporate supply chain logistics, and our physical infrastructure were all built for the predictable, manageable climate of the past, how do we go about redesigning our entire society for a future where the unprecedented is just an average Tuesday?
It's a fundamental question about how we build the future, and we really can no longer afford to ignore it.
We're all on that track now, and we can't afford to just hope the monitoring systems catch the fire before we're completely encased in it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay safe, look out for your neighbors, and we'll catch you next time.